Hi, I'm Timothy Connolly.
I'm Thomas Michael Cavanagh.
Welcome to Experience Points.
We're going to start our first episode here with This Week in Music.
Yes, that's right. This week in music. Well, we have to talk about what U2 is doing at the MSG Sphere in Las Vegas coming up in October. They're doing the Octung Baby album from start to finish, and of course, they're going to do a whole bunch of their other hits. I'm sure Octung Baby only takes up one set, then I'm sure they'll do a whole another set after that, probably an encore, talking about a 2 hour, maybe even a 3 hour show. So you're getting a lot of showtime from the band, which is cool. However, the concert prices are just absurd. They're ranging from what I've seen today, anywhere from $5,000 if you want to sit up close to right around $600 if you want to sit in the nosebleeds. It's pretty outrageous. Tom, what do you make of these concert prices?
I think it's gotten, really out of control. And I think some of it is people trying to make up for the lack of income through the COVID period. It seems like there's price gouging, and people I work with in the industry have told me straight out, like venues, that we are charging more to make up for what we lost. So that's maybe part of it. Uh, I don't know. It's a tough call to say who's demanding that money. Is it the sponsors? You never really know anymore. Is U2 actually asking for that sum?
This is
You
true.
know, or is it that U2 is getting a flat rate and then the sponsors and the promoters are jacking up the prices because they know that it's going to be. So, I mean, I think that requires some research to really know. But it's again, that stuff is not easily attainable by the average, show goer like you and myself.
I know this is very true. And some insight on that real quick. I don't know how true this is, but it's public knowledge that the creation of the venue costed $1.8 billion. That's billion with a B to create the MSG Sphere, this state-of-the-art performance venue that seats 17,500 people and also has this incredible new sound system, which is called Sphere Immersive Sound. And
Right.
it was partially created in Germany by a company called Holoplot. And it features something that they're referring to as audio beamforming technology in order to create planar waves that provides uniform audio all throughout the venue. So no matter where you're sitting, you're going to be hearing it exactly the same as if you were right in the middle or as if you were all the way off to one side. Last year in New York City, the Beacon Theater took that very same sound system and installed it in the Beacon Theater. They did this when Trey Anastasio from Fish played 2 nights at the Beacon. That was the debut of this new sound system there. It was such a big hit. And Trey was raving about it afterwards. I think they still have it installed at the Beacon Theater now, even though it's only been installed as of 2022. So if you're going to go to the MSG Sphere and you're going to pay $600, $1,000, 2,000, 5,000, whatever it is, not only are you going to see an A-list band, of course, but you're also going to get to experience this incredible state-of-the-art sound technology that is now, I guess, going to be the new gold standard. What do you think, Tom?
I think the idea sounds great as as a concert goer, listener, and as a performer. I think it's great. Um, I think there's been attempts to do sound systems like this before, or these kind of things where, like, let's say every seat in the house has its own sound system,
Right.
which is, I know places have tried that, including places in Vegas. Um, I'd be curious to see how that really works. I have not attended. I'm planning to possibly go to a show at the Beacon this summer, but like,
Who do you want
I
to see?
don't. I was going to go see Joe Satriani. I believe
Okay.
it's playing
Well,
there.
you'll get to see the Sphere Immersive Sound.
I was hoping that it's still in intact there at that time. I think it is permanently going to be there. Um, I don't know what the costs are to even run a system like that. I guess you'd have to be somewhat trained differently as a sound engineer. So I think there is a lot that goes into it, which maybe is also making it more expensive for a venue to even host something like that. I mean, do you have to be certified in that kind of sound system? It's like when, certain sound companies started first using like digital boards and using, 100% digital plugins. Regular sound men who for years had just, pushed faders and turned dials were now out of work because they don't know how to use this stuff. So
That's
I'm
true.
curious.
There might
Yeah,
only be a dozen people in the entire world that know how to work this particular sound system.
exactly. So I mean, are we paying higher concert ticket prices for that reason? It'd be kind of good thing, and maybe anybody who is listening and enjoying our uh, Experience Point show, they can write to us and let us to know what they know in our listener mail.
Right? If you have any information regarding how this all works with this new sphere immersive sound technology, please drop a note in the comment section for us below, and we'll see what we can do about looking into that and interacting with you on it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of mixed information on the line. You read about it, and some people say it cost a certain amount of money, some people say it costs another, but it's apparently like 164,000 speakers or something ridiculous.
Oh God, yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that stat.
At
I don't know
least
how true that is.
I can't imagine that.
How do you even imagine that?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, without getting too technical for the audience, but like, when you have a bigger venue and you have to provide sound in multiple places, you have to actually compensate for the sound dissipating. So it would be very interesting, like, um, uh, how are they doing that? But it really, I guess it's this beam technology. I would love to know more about it. I feel that there's almost like a secret about it. Like they've been kind of very secretive. Maybe they don't want the knowledge out there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This sounds like something they should be covering on MTV News, by the way.
MTV News, which I heard was ended. They ended it. Ironically, it was I don't know if it was today or this week, but
I saw that. I did see
did
that.
you did you even know it was still running?
No, I did not. The last time I knew MTV News was even a thing was probably during the Reagan administration.
Yeah,
Uh,
I remember
yeah.
some MTV News in the 90s, but I didn't even know that MTV had any kind of news at all. I thought it was just reality shows.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was very surprised. I saw on social media that Martha Quinn, the old MTV VJ, made a post about how, okay, this is the end of MTV News. And that was just this past week or earlier this week. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I
Um,
was I was shocked to find that out.
I was shocked. Well, life is certainly full of its surprises, that's for sure.
Yes.
And well, it's time that oh my goodness, take a look at this. We're receiving listener mail already.
Wow.
This is pretty unbelievable, considering this is our pilot episode. It looks
Word
like
is getting out.
there's not one but two letters here that came in for us by email that we should take a look at the very least. Thank you, folks, for writing in. This first letter comes from Stubby Honig of East Rockaway, New York, and Stubby writes, "What pairs best with a cheesesteak sandwich?"
Hmm.
That's a very good question, Stubby. Well, my first thought immediately goes to Pringles chips, because having chips on the side with a sandwich has always been the way to go for me. So if you're asking me what pairs best with a cheesesteak sandwich, I'm going to say Pringles chips. What do you say, Tom?
It's been a while since I had a cheesesteak sandwich. I did have one in the last several years, and what I actually had with it, which I thought was great, you had options on the side. You can have regular fries or things like that, but sweet potato fries. Imagine it for a moment. It actually was really good.
Now there's a thought. I don't think I've ever even had sweet potato fries before, but I can already almost taste it.
Oh, they're great.
I'll
Much
bet.
healthier, and they're great.
Well, I think that's I think that's going to do it for Stubby's question.
W should go out and try both, you know?
Yeah, you know what? Why not both? You can certainly enjoy sweet potato fries and Pringles chips on the side together with a cheesesteak sandwich. In fact, that's probably the best way to go. So there's your answer, Stubby. Thanks for writing in, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we've got another letter here from Spike Epstein of Paramus, New Jersey. And Spike writes, "Who was the most talented member of the Ramones?" Tom,
Wow.
what do you think?
That's an incredibly tough question. Um,
I
you
almost want to say Dee Dee.
so Dee comes to mind first because he wrote such an enormous amount of material, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you know that does come to mind first. I
But
mean,
then
it
I want to also say Johnny.
Johnny was amazing. You know, his guitar technique was different than everybody else's. He had a thing that was, you know, a talent that was different than everybody else had.
Yep.
He also wrote great things and provided a certain sound to that band. But you can't ignore, if we're going with the original Ramones, you can't ignore Tommy because he not only was, you know, really keeping that beat and creating that drum sound that became like a different piece of punk history. You know, a lot of people, you know, try to mimic that. That's a very difficult drum thing that he did that was very himself. Like, you
I
know,
know
no,
CJ had some big shoes to fill there.
I agree. But he also was, you know, when you think about Tom, he also produced a lot of that stuff. So he had that talent as well. And then you can't take away anything from Joey, who has a unique voice. It's very difficult to sound like Joey.
No, Joey doesn't sound like anybody else. I agree.
And he wrote interesting lyrics, and it was something about the quality of his voice. So, you know, I think that the Ramones, I don't know if I can honestly answer who was the most talented. I would say I would lean towards, like you said, Dee just because I love his bass playing on that stuff. He did things that were different than most bass players. He approached things differently. He went for higher octaves to cut through Johnny, and he created more interesting kind of bass lines to complement what Johnny was doing, but also lock in with Tommy. I think it's a tough, for me, that would be a very, very tough thing to say. It's almost, you know, the who's your favorite child when you have kids, you know, like, you
Yeah,
know, who's your favorite? I can't even answer who my favorite Ramon is because I start to go on that. I go, well, you can't ignore Joey, you can't ignore Dee you can't ignore Tommy, and then you can't ignore CJ or any of the people that came in later, you know,
I know. It's
Marky, you know,
Well, Spike, thanks for sending us the unanswerable question.
yeah,
Um, I'm gonna take I'm just gonna take a stab at picking one that I think is the most talented of the bunch after giving it some thought and discussing it with you here and now. And I'm gonna say Joey
wow,
because of his health challenges and what
yes,
he had to overcome to be able to do what he did. It transcended talent, just in my own eyes, in my own estimation. But going across the board with everybody that was in that band, I mean, there really just was so much talent. And I can't say that they were underrated or that they are underrated because they've always been given their proper due, as far as I could tell. Ever since I first began listening to them in the 1970s, when we all did. And it was nice to see them making music for as long as they did, and they went for a good long while. But anyway, thanks again, Spike, for writing in that letter. Very cool.
that was a good
It's
one.
time now for our next big segment, which is the deep dive. And in the deep dive, we're going to be taking a look today at the legacy of Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee. I hope that a lot of our listeners out there are aware of Sun Records from Memphis, Tennessee. While, of course, the record label is no longer a thing today, it was very much a thing a long time ago, in the 1950s to be exact. Tom, what do you think about Sun Records?
Sun Records provided us with some of the, you know, greatest talent that we have. For me, it's very special since I do, um, you know, I'm a huge rockabilly fan. I think a lot of rockabilly came out of Sun and that sound. Also, being a giant Johnny Cash fan, Carl Perkins, one of my favorite guitar players, Roy Orbison, one of my favorite singers. It just gave us so much. I love everything about Sun. I do think I don't know if it's still in business in the same sense. I know that in 2021, a bigger company bought it, Primary Wave, which is a big company. I don't know if they're necessarily just a record company. I think they bought Sun as an entity so that they can own the museum, and then they also can issue shirts. And then I know that they've been reissuing Sun Records on vinyl.
Okay,
Um,
so they still have publishing
I
rights
think
to a lot of those old
some,
songs?
I believe so. I believe that there's some licensing that Primary took over. Um, I don't know the full extent of the deal. It was just something I had picked up over time from following Sun. Um,
How great was Sam Phillips?
it was brilliant, you know. I mean, Sam Phillips, so interesting because it his whole concept of taking he originally really just which is kind of ironic when you think about it. His initial goal is let me find black artists,
Right?
right? And show them to a white audience, right? And he was
Hmm.
like, he wanted to focus on African Americans, which to me, African American music is American music. So much of our music comes from that more than anything. Um, you know, rock and roll is really a direct result of African American music,
The
jazz.
blues.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just coming from that. We wouldn't have music if in here the way I think it is today. And he knew that. And he was like, let me get rid of these other things and focus on this specific thing. But ironically, he ends up really signing the biggest white names in history, which
I
is
know.
also great, you know, like
He had
um
them all.
he had them all. But it's interesting that I loved how he started out wanting to do that. And he did do that. He certainly got some bands out there. I think, right? Ike Turner was, right? Isn't Ike Turner one of his early kind of discoveries?
I think
Um,
so. And
yes,
Ike is sometimes credited with having written the first rock and roll song, although I don't know how true that is. And I guess there are other candidates too, but I
Rocket
think,
88.
yeah, Rocket 88. Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah.
Um, I know that in addition to doing the engineering and the production and all of that, Sam also had other folks come in and do some engineering in there too. For instance, Scotty Moore, who was Elvis Presley's guitar player, used to do engineering there. Um, and I remember, I think it was Steve Cropper from Booker T and the MGs who would sometimes go and record at Sun when Scotty was taking a break, or Steve would go and fill in for Scotty as an engineer sometimes, just as work on the side. Although Steve with Booker T and the MGs, those were Stax Volt guys. They weren't really Sun guys. They had their own thing going on. Also in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis was a real epicenter for a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of what became popular music in terms of rock. Um, and I mean, just to tell our listeners some of these artists who were part of that label. I mean, my goodness, from Charlie Rich to Carl Perkins to Jerry Lee Lewis to Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison and Bill Justice, and the list just goes on and on. There are so many, and I don't think that very many of them stayed with Sun for very long. I
No, they
think
did
they
about
outgrew
4 years.
Sun.
Yeah.
And I think I hope there was something in it for Sam at the end of the day when it was all said and done, and those recording artists who were fledgling artists who then went on to become big stars. I hope that they took care of Sam in some way, or that there was something in it for him other than just recognition. But I don't really know. We may never even really know. But what are some of your favorite Sun Records songs?
Uh the early Johnny Cash that was released on Sun, which is like Hey Porter with the flip side of Cry Cry Cry.
Uh-huh.
Um, two of my favorite. Um,
Straight A's in Love.
Straight A's in Love, you know, one of your favorites.
Oh,
Uh,
that is my favorite.
um,
That might be my favorite Sun Records song, actually.
wow, that's amazing.
It's my favorite Johnny Cash song. I do know that.
I know that.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, my brother. Please continue.
Um, I would say, you know, Carl Perkins,
Blue
the early
Suede Shoes
like
by Carl
Blue Suede
Perkins.
Shoes is a Sun record that to me is still something that is just a masterpiece of early rock and roll and rockabilly, the guitar playing, his vocals, the vibe. You know, one of the brilliant things about that place, Sun Studios itself, not even just a record label, but Sun Studios, when you think about the limited technology and the size of that room, and they're recording everybody with like one microphone, and they had little X's on the floor. You stand here. This is where the guitar player stands. And, you
Was
know,
it 2 track or 4 track? Do you remember?
the early years were 2 track. That was it.
Okay. Two
Yeah.
track reel to reel, and that's it, right?
That's it. You've got, yeah. So you have one microphone or two microphones, a room mic and maybe an overhead, and just it's amazing. It's an incredible thing. There's a great documentary on YouTube that somebody made from England where they recreated a sun-like studio, a studio as it was in like 1952 or 54. And it's a great documentary. They get very into how things were done. So Sam was brilliant in that. But obviously, my favorite Elvis record, since you asked me what my favorite record is, was the Sun Sessions. I heard that as a teenager. I knew who Elvis was. I loved Elvis as a kid. My mother was a big Elvis fan. I loved Elvis, but I never had really heard the entire Sun Sessions record. And it came out. Somebody told me, you got to check this out. I was only in high school, and somebody said, you got to check this out. You got to hear Scotty Moore. You got to hear Scotty Moore. Elvis on this record. And I knew all the big Elvis hits, right? And I went to Tower Records and I bought it on CD. I bought the Sun Sessions. I have it behind me here in this rack of CDs.
How many
And
discs is it? Is it one?
it's one record. It was just one
Okay,
record originally. It wasn't like the complete Sun collection. It was just like one record.
right.
And it was
I
called the
need this.
Sun
I need this
Sessions.
one in my collection.
Oh, absolutely. It is now available on vinyl as well. Um, and it's just great. As a matter of fact, the CD comes with bonus tracks, outtakes. So like take one of, you know, of
Take one of That's All Right, and
yeah,
then
like things like that. Like,
right, Lordy
um,
Miss Claudy, all that fun stuff.
so
Oh
it's
man,
just an amazing record. It's an amazing record, and Scotty is amazing on it. But that's
and to
probably
think they recorded that all with just two mics.
I know. I know. I'm sitting here in the studio with, 100 mics and I have a 32 channel board here, and I probably still can't create the magic that they did.
Nobody can create that,
No.
but that is fun stuff. All right. Well, now everybody, it's time for our big album spotlight. And today's album in our album spotlight is Abbey Road by the Beatles, 1969. Now, there is so much to say about this particular album. It's hard to almost even know where to begin, but I know where I'd like to begin. I first became aware of this album in the 1970s when I was growing up, and my parents owned a copy of it on vinyl. And as I was growing up, I came to realize that, okay, this came out in 1969, and the Let It Be album came out a year later, or a year and a half later, whatever it was. And so I always thought to myself, oh, okay, well, then they must have recorded Abbey Road before they recorded Let It Be because it was released in that order. But boy, was I wrong. They recorded Let It Be first, and then Abbey Road after that. And yet they released Abbey Road first and Let It Be after Abbey Road, which to me has always been the strangest thing about the Abbey Road album, just for me personally. Not because of the music itself or anything like that, or the message it tries to get across, but just the way that the record label decided to do that. And I love Abbey Road as an album, even though I remember John Lennon saying in some later interviews that he didn't particularly care for the Abbey Road album, um, especially not the second side. Now, I love side A and I love side B. And why wouldn't I? I think we all do. But I guess with John being on the inside looking out, at the time he had jolly well had it up to here with his bandmates and Alan Klein and everybody else that was involved with Apple Records. I'm sure he was ready for a clean break from all that, as they all were. They needed a break from each other. But the music itself still stands the test of time. If you listen to Abbey Road today, it's still as rewarding and satisfying as it was in 1969. Although I have a confession to make. I have never listened to Abbey Road on vinyl since the 1970s.
Wow.
80s, 90s onwards, only on other formats, cassette tapes and CDs. And that's it. I would love to hear Abbey Road on vinyl again someday. To me, that would feel like going home. Tom, what do you think about Abbey Road?
I love it. I was uh made aware of it for me, the first time was I think honestly, when I heard the whole album, it was around 1983, 84, somewhere around there. I heard, obviously I'd heard some of the songs before, but I never really heard the whole album. I heard it at a neighbor's house across the street, and he said, you got to check this out. And it was very similar to you. He found it in his parents' record collection, and we were young, so it was entertaining. The song I remember that stuck out right away was Maxwell Silverhammer, just because I was, being like an 11-year-old kid, thinking like this is entertaining. Like it was a silly kind of song, and I loved it. I do remember hearing, I
Yeah,
guess
you
also
loved it. A song about a murderer. Nice, Tom.
right. I think it was like, and obviously back then we just thought it was a silly song, bang bang, and you hear the anvil. So it was like one of those things where that stuck out to me. I just remember hearing that.
There
Um,
was a real anvil in the recording studio when they recorded that song, I heard.
it is, and who
Yep.
plays it?
And who plays it? I'm going to guess Paul McCartney.
Mal Evans
Oh, Mal Evans. That's right. Damn it.
was giving it, and I
Mal
got
Evans was one of the handlers for the band, and he was always a pretty cool dude for them to have around.
a little offshoot here. I did a concert when I used to play with this one particular band, and I was playing guitar for them, and we were doing Abbey Road from beginning to end. And and at the theater that we were at, I looked over during sound check and I noticed they had these anvil like weights to hold curtains down. And
Uh-huh.
when that part of the song came up, I brought one on stage and I played it. And it was amazing.
Perfect.
It was a little heavy to hit, but it was awesome. It was like bang, bang. But that's a little side note.
Now, that was a cool moment of inspiration for you, my
Yes, it
brother.
was for me, it was very exciting. I felt like it brought me back to the first time I heard it in as a kid in like 83 or 84. Um,
I'm sure
but
the first 5 rows in the audience were throwing their underpants at you when you did that one.
I wish, but I think the band looked at me like, "Where'd you get that?" Because I had not told anybody I was going to do it. I just kind of went over and did the bang bang. But anyway, the record in itself, I think is a phenomenal record. I own it on CD. I listen to it endlessly on CD. Um, I
How
did.
iconic is the cover art?
It's amazing. I
I
did get
know,
it
and if
on
you look carefully, you can see lots of Paul is Dead clues on that cover art too.
allegedly. Yeah. I think it's brilliant. I think it's what a cool idea. Like, we need a cover. Let's just go outside, walk across the street.
Yep,
It showed how simplistic the Beatles had become. I also understand what you're saying about Lennon not really being into this record. When you think about it, he wasn't really even there.
I
They,
know.
you know, they say he was barely there. So I don't, I love it because it's also got two of my favorite George Harrison songs.
Oh, those George Harrison makes that album in a lot of ways for me.
Absolutely. Even his vocal harmony. I was ironically just listening to it before I knew that you were even picking this. Because I have the reissue on vinyl, the remastered, and I have the original vinyl upstairs. And I do listen to it regularly, and I wish you lived closer because I would have you over to listen to it.
Well, I would
But
love to do that. I've never heard the remastered version of the album. Um, and so you've heard the remaster. Do you think that they've cleaned it up a lot, or what have they done to make it better now?
I do think that things pop out more. You can hear George's vocals like more clearly. There's a little bit more
That's
individuality.
nice. That's a nice
Yeah.
touch.
I think it's like I just think things are a little cleaner. You can hear things. I go back to the original. I love it too. There is a certain in that mushiness that does exist there and the mixing. There's something beautiful about that, and authentic. And I think, but there's some kind of when they remastered it. There's some more clarity. That's just even just the guitar tones, the bass tones, the drums. There's something about the drums that stick out more, and you can hear the brilliance in each musician in that record.
Well, the next time I visit New York, if you're still in New York, I'm gonna make it a point to come on by and enjoy a listen of that with you.
I hope so.
That would be great. I mean, I listen to Abbey Road at least once a year, certainly more often than once, but at least once. And I have favorites in terms of what songs on there are my favorites. Currently, my favorite is, you're not going to believe this, but my favorite song is Sun King.
Excellent.
Um, I just I think it's a marvelous piece of music. I enjoy playing it on ukulele, and I enjoy listening to the music itself. I think it's an incredible arrangement, the way it begins with the nature sounds in the beginning, and it starts very soft and comes in very gentle just like a sunrise would in the morning. It's so cool.
It is
Um,
so brilliant.
it's nice. An interesting counterweight to George's song, Here Comes the Sun. So you have two songs about the sun on this album.
Yeah,
And the sun, while Sun King isn't necessarily a song about sun or the sun, I'm going to guess it's a song about King Louis XIV in France, who was referred to as the Sun King. I'm guessing it's a song about him because it also includes a bunch of nonsense words in the lyrics towards the end, where if you don't quite know what they're singing, it almost sounds like French. Try it
right.
sometime. An interesting, well, a new perspective, I suppose, of listening to the Sun King song.
I like how we've brought the sun into today's segment because we had Sun Records and now we're talking about the two Sun songs.
I didn't even realize that. Thank you for pointing that out, Tom. Now we have the trifecta.
Yes,
Very good.
brilliant. Yeah.
And that brings us now to our final segment of the episode. This segment is called You Should Have a Library Card. Why do we call it You Should Have a Library Card? Well, we call it that because you should be reading books and rereading too. Not only is reading fundamental, but rereading is fundamental. And Tom and I read books all the time. In fact, Tom's reading a great book lately called Shredders. Tom, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was so I go to the library on a regular basis and not just for books. I think it's an amazing, and I've been using this since I was a teenager, an amazing resource for records, like CDs, vinyl, but also movies. There's like classic movies that are not streaming and things like that. And somebody will mention a movie to me, which happened recently. And I was like, I haven't seen that movie or I haven't seen that in years. And you don't see these things easily attainable on streaming or something like that. So I think the library as a whole is an amazing place for that, but also bookstores for me as well. But this is a book, and I'll hold it up briefly, but we'll also put it on the screen.
There it is.
A great picture of Edward Van Halen. So I go to a lot of used bookstores, and I constantly, when I'm gigging, when I'm traveling, I go to used bookstores. And I was in the music section and I saw this book. I'd never heard of it. And I said, wow, it's got it. Even, I didn't know what it was. And growing up in that era and being a shredder and being a fan of shredding, I picked it up and I said, this is great. And I really would tell anybody who's not even just a guitar player, just people in general, go out and pick this up. The interesting thing for me that connected with me was that when I read the opening, um, Greg Prado, who wrote it, is like my age, our age, and grew up here as a guitar player. And his whole opening statement sounded like my teenage years. Like one of the big concerts that affected his life was David Lee Roth with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan and
Are
the
you
Evening
sure he's
Star.
not you? You're not
I
really
was
Greg Frido,
wondering if
are you?
I was wondering if I have like, some, secret identity
Some
that I
evil
don't.
twin?
Yeah. I want to meet this guy. I've never met him. I don't know who he is. Again, Long Island guy lived right near me. Um, but I found the
Well,
book to be really, really cool. I thought it was it's like an oral history, they call it, of like that shred guitar. So there's interviews with every guitar player from the 70s up, even modern guitar players talking about that period and the influence that each person had. I think it's a great book, and go to the library, take it out. I talk about reading all the time with my students, with my guitar students and piano students and stuff, and they go, "Oh, I don't have enough money to go buy a book." Well, you don't need to. You don't need to. Go to the
borrow it.
library. They're
Borrow it
filled with
from the
books.
library.
Yeah. And now you could even be lazier than ever before in the history of laziness and just get it. My library here has a program, an app that you can download. And you go to the app and you can stream any music. They have a whole music. You can stream it for 7 days or 14 days. You can download books and read it at home. You don't even have to get out of your chair and
That's
go
just what I've always wanted. Another excuse to be lazy.
there. So what are you reading?
Before I tell you what I'm reading, I just want to comment on how awesome that cover art is for that
Oh,
book. That photograph of Eddie. And it just brought up a question that I was remembering I remember only just now that I wanted to ask you. If you could only listen to one Van Halen song for the rest of your life, which
oh,
Van Halen song would it be?
wow. That is incredibly different. That's a question nobody's asked me. Um, That would be a hard one. I'm gonna go with, just because it's fun, the guitar stuff is great on it. Somebody get me a doctor.
Great choice. I had a feeling you would go for one of those earlier songs. For me,
I,
it's
I'm a,
Mean
I'm a big,
Street, but I can totally see where you're coming from with Somebody Get Me a Doctor. Absolutely.
yeah. One day we'll have to. That's going to be a segment diving into some of those records. But the entire Fair Warning record to me is great. But somebody get me a doctor. I love Van Halen too, and I just love that song. It's just a fun song. The guitar tone is amazing.
I know.
Everything's great about it.
Great stuff there. And for me, in terms of what I'm reading these days, I'm reading a book by Stephen King, which is by no means a new book. This book was published in 1983, which makes this year the 40th anniversary year of the book. So happy anniversary to Christine by Stephen King. Christine was Stephen King's horror book that came out about the killer car, the 1958 Plymouth Fury. Now, I just was also recently noticing that the book was adapted into a film, and the film was directed by John Carpenter. Now, I've seen that film numerous times over the years, and it's always pretty enjoyable. The film came out in 1983 also. So you have the novel coming out in 83, and then the film adaptation coming out in 83 right away also. How does that happen? To go from book to screen so fast like that, we rarely see that these days, and if ever. And so I'm wondering who was writing the screenplay for the film adaptation of Christine. So to all our viewers and listeners out there, if you happen to know any history behind that, please drop a comment below. So if you know the answer, please let us know. Enlighten us. We would love to know the answer.
I
And
know who wrote the screenplay, but I don't know the history behind or the continuity of it. I don't. I think Bill Phillips wrote the screenplay.
any
I remember.
relation to Sam Phillips?
I don't know, but here we are again talking about the different things, right?
It's a
Um,
small world.
yeah, I think Bill Phillips wrote the screenplay. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember from the movie posters. And I
Well,
don't know the order of. I don't know the actual timeline. Uh,
maybe Bill Phillips was writing the screenplay together while King was writing the novel, and they were sort of comparing notes together. That reminds me of like what Arthur C. Clarke did with Stanley Kubrick when they did 2001: A Space Odyssey. Clarke was writing the novel at the same time Kubrick was directing the film, and Clarke and Kubrick were sharing ideas together. In the novel, for instance, Clarke had the Discovery spacecraft go all the way out to Saturn. However, in the film, Kubrick only has the astronauts go out as far as Jupiter, and it's a different story in a lot of ways. Now, if you look at the book and you look at the film for Christine, you're going to see lots of differences, stark contrast. For example, right off the bat, the book clocks in at about 525 pages. It's a big book, and there's a lot of character development and a lot going on in that book that does not take place in the film, and with good reason. Now that I've read the now that I've read the book for my first time, and I just finished it last week, it's still fresh in my mind, and I'm remembering all the times I've seen the John Carpenter film version of it over the years too. And it's just astonishing to me how much was left out from the film that should have been included. For instance, the car chase involving Christine chasing a Corvette. No driver in the car for Christine, just Christine herself driving herself, pissed off at night in the snow when roads are icy and chasing a Corvette that's going 120 miles an hour in an effort to escape from Christine. Meanwhile, Christine starts to rev up and go 120 miles herself. And, of course, smack the Corvette off the road. Or was it a Camaro? Either a Corvette or a Camaro, I forget. I'll have to double check that. If you are aware of, to our listeners out there, if you remember if it was a Camaro or a Corvette that Christine runs off the road in the book, please drop it into the comment section below and enlighten us once again. Because as much as we know about this or that, we don't know everything and we can't remember everything either, but we do our best here at Experience Points. And so I thank you very much for joining us. That was this segment called You Should Have a Library Card, and you should. If you don't have one, go out and get one. I'm pretty sure it doesn't cost anything. If it does, it would be a small fee, and it's
It
so
doesn't,
worth it too.
yeah, from what I understand, there's no cost at all to do that. Everybody should have one. And you can even do it from home now. You can do it and sign up from home if you're not capable of getting there. You just go to your library on web, and do that.
So do it. I know you love to be lazy, but it only takes 2 seconds and it's over with before you know it. And then you've got your library card. And the good news is, once you've got a library card, you might not even have to renew it ever with the way some library systems are set. In New York, I know they do it a certain way where you have to renew the card every once in a while.
I just did. Yeah.
Here in the state of Nevada, it seems like you just register it one time and it becomes a lifetime card for you. And you can even go to the library and use their computers if you just want to use their internet and surf the web for a while. There's all kinds of uses for the card. So by all means, go out and get one. And I thank you all for listening. This has been our pilot episode of Experience Points. I thank you very much for joining us,
Been
and
great fun.
we will see you next time. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tim.
And on that note, we say adios.
Bye.